Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Good morning and welcome to Coffee Chat with Mohsin. I just want to first of all say I'm Juhi Tahir. I'm the Executive Director and co-founder of Mohsin. I'm so thrilled today to be sharing an all-female panel. It's not often that we kind of see that happen. And I just want to thank everyone who's going to be watching online for sharing your Sunday morning with us. This is precious time. But kind of in preparation for tomorrow being International Women's Day, we just wanted to kind of share some of the voices of some really, really amazing, strong women in our community as an organization that truly believes in inclusion, and also an organization that's predominantly staffed and led by women. I thought it was really important that we kind of pull together this discussion this morning. And we really want to shine a light on some of these women in particular. I mean, we have amidst us today, we have an author, we have an intercultural expert, we have an expert, we have a lawyer, we have, the most amazing talents, mashallah, in our Muslim women. And so that's kind of what we want to share with you with a very, very informal chat today. I'm just really going to be moderating and sitting back and let them, share some of the points that we're going to talk about. And I'm actually going to throw a question out at each of them that they don't even know. They have not prepared for this. So I'm sorry, ladies, but you're going to be great. What we're going to do is, before we get into any introductions of any sort, and I think this is really important, I'd love to have people here, my guests on the panel, my esteemed guests. I'd love for you to take 3 words, just 3 words. Think about yourself. And I know we want to use labels today, and we often shy away from labels, but if you were to give yourself 3 words, and you just want people to know what those 3 words are. So don't even introduce yourself. We're going to jump into the intros later, but I'm going to give you my 3 words, and then I'm going to pass it off to each of you. My first word for myself is mother. My second word for myself is advocate. My third word for myself is dreamer. And with that, I'm gonna just kind of go over to Sister Sadia, who's joining us from Hong Kong. Welcome and thank you. And we'll do intros later, but Sadia, give us your 3 words, please.
Author, I'm an idealist, and a daughter.
Awesome, an author, an idealist, and a daughter, mashallah. I'll send it over to Lubna, to our dear friend Luby from the East Coast. Please go ahead with your 3 words.
Heart, mother, and interfaith activist.
Amazing, excellent, mashallah. And we'll go down to Sister Aida, who's right here in the bottom right.
So I think mine would kind of be determined, overcomer, and then just Muslim.
Excellent, of course. And then, of course, Sister Danya, who's over here with us. Please go ahead.
I was going to say Mama Bear Lawyer. So more like 1 phrase or 3 words, but I would say
Mama Bear Lawyer. Okay, excellent. Well, as you can see, we have quite a bit of diversity here represented, mashallah, and that should try to get you interested and excited to hear a little bit more about what we have to say. So I'm going to jump right in. I'm going to ask for just kind of a short introduction and just letting, people out there who are watching us to know a little bit about yourself, but also how you got into the disability world. Some of us, quite by accident have kind of fallen into the work that we do. And at the same time, I think it's important to know that my first, even kind of intersection with the world of disability was many, many years ago with my mother, who became disabled due to illness. And then after that, around the same time with my daughter, who also became disabled, but through her development stages. And so what's really important is that each of us in our own right have come into this world in a different way. And so I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves and then also talk about how you got into, this area. So if I can just, whoever wants to start, anyone want to start, go right ahead. This is very casual.
I can start. I'm Sadia. I was born and raised in Hong Kong, so literally the opposite side of the globe. And I was born with muscular weaknesses, also known as congenital myopathy. So I'm a wheelchair user, and I use the breathing machine whenever I'm lying down. And during my childhood, I was hospitalized a lot. So you can say that I was born into the disability world. But my disability experiences growing up has shaped a lot of what I do today. So during my hospital stays in my childhood, I used to read books on the stories of the prophets, and that really helped me grow. So I made a promise to myself when I was 8 years old that when I grow up, inshallah, I'll write a book on how to find strength from the stories of the prophet. So I studied English literature at university. I became a writer for different outlets. And then I wrote a book called Strength from Within that is based on my life with physical disabilities and how to derive strength from the stories of the prophet. Right now it's with publishers, so it's not yet printed, but chapter 1 is out for download if any one of you wants to read. But growing up, especially when doing community work and being involved in the community, I realized that writing or speaking about disability or even Islam, it's not enough. We need to actively work with others to find solutions. So last year, I joined a fellowship, a social justice fellowship called Disabilities, Less Assumptions, More Conversations. And from there, I got to engage and work with people from different walks of life to find solutions. So this is where I'm at right now in the disability world.
Amazing, excellent, mashallah. And yeah, I think we cannot wait for your book to actually be published and come out. We'll be sharing that. Wonderful to hear about that background. Jazakallah khair. Let's jump over. I'll just go to you, Lubna, Lubi, if that's okay.
I'm actually, for me, I was diagnosed. I actually, for most of my life, I did not have a disability. So it's something that I've evolved with multiple sclerosis. It's a degenerative neurological disease in which the body attacks the cover on the nerves. And so I've gone from a cane to a walker to a wheelchair, a scooter, and now this power chair. And so it's been different perhaps than Sadia, and thus it's been a identity that I've had to adapt to, and it's one that I've said it's the diversity identity that I have learned from, I have grown from, and it's one that has been all embracing because it crosses race, it crosses religion, it crosses socioeconomic status, culture, that we know that living with disability or diverse abilities is a 24/7 open enrollment. And thus I am a proud member of this group.
I'm so glad to have you, and I think that's such a pertinent point. Oftentimes when I speak, I say disability does not discriminate, and any one of us, as we were just hearing from our speaker, any one of us can find ourselves in that position, from birth, from injury, from illness, from old age, and just really sometimes even for no reason. So I think that's really important when people put it into that category of, I don't deal with that. Well, anyone can deal with this, whether it's themselves or a loved one. So we appreciate your voice on that. I'll jump to Ada. If you can give us a little introduction of your story, that would be great.
Yeah, so I was kind of thrown into the disability world at birth. I was born with a form of muscular dystrophy called spinal muscular atrophy. So over the years, it's progressed, and that's kind of muscularly, you just that's what happens. And alhamdulillah for it all. But I was born into it, and ever since then, it's been, I mean, a forced part of my life. It's not necessarily something you choose when you're born into it, but it's, for a while, it was spreading awareness through just schoolwork and just being myself uh, as like a representative of the disabled world. I mean, it's just being myself that I've been that way. And then about 7 or 8 years ago, I started work with my local masjids through our youth programs, and I was exposed more to not that I didn't know it, but the different predispositions that Muslims a lot of the times have about the about the disabled community, and so from there I kind of went from just living and breathing it and kind of seeing where it goes from there to like actually putting effort into um, advocating for it and putting myself out there into the community because I realized I went to a public school, and so it was harder to fully grasp just outside of my family how I don't want to say ignorant, but the lack of knowledge for this community. And so I felt like since I was thrown into it, born into it, it was kind of in a way selfish of me to keep that to myself and not spread awareness to it, not just for the sake of myself, but for the sake of the entire community and the entire ummah.
So I think I think that's so important. And, again, Jazakallah khair for, all three of you that have spoken as self-advocates, because, no one can speak for you, really. You have that capability that none of us could ever dream of conveying. And I think we met you in a community, in a class setting, actually in an educational setting. One of our team members met you for the first time, and then since then have seen you kind of be more forthright. So showing up and being there is part of this. And I'm gonna go to Sister Danya now, and have her introduce herself, and maybe her journey is a little bit different than what we've heard. So please go ahead, Danya.
Sure, thank you. So my journey started actually with my son. He was diagnosed with ADHD and more recently autism. And so I was not born into the disability world. So it's something that I had to learn, and I had to learn really fast. One of the biggest challenges, being in the Muslim community is, I would say the stigma. And even when I was a child, when we hear the words ADHD, we think bad child, or maybe the parents don't know how to, like to raise that child, or he's just hyperactive, or he just needs to play outside more. And the more I experienced, some of the challenges that we had, I realized that none of that was true. And then also, like when I heard ADHD, it was something like you don't really want to talk about either. And that was kind of the approach that I took at first. I didn't want to talk about his diagnosis. And but then I realized, if he sees me not wanting to talk about it, how's that going to, what impression is that going to leave on him as he grows older? Is he going to think that it's something he should be ashamed of, or he should be embarrassed of? And so I'm really trying to impart this lesson that it's not something to be ashamed of. It's just something like life is full of challenges, regardless of what it is. And this is one of them, and you should be proud of who you are. And so now I've taken more of like an outspoken approach to that, and I hope that, and then also too, just being able to speak with other people in the community has helped as we overcame our challenges, in the school, just what kind of doctors to get, and that's just not possible if no one ever talks about it. And so a lot of people come to me privately with their issues, and I don't expect everyone to go public, but I would not have been able to help my son the way I did, if it was not for the brave people who were outspoken and willing to talk to me about their experiences.
Yeah, very great point. I think you brought up a very significant point, and that being stigma in our community. We hear it a lot. Some of us have lived it, some of us have talked about it, some of us are trying to address it, which kind of takes me to my next question in our session today, which is, the most challenging part of advocating for this group, whether you're self-advocating, whether you're advocating for others. For me, what I found, again, we took a personal test in our life, a tribulation, you can say, with our daughter, and said, we can't be the only ones out there. And so we said, let's kind of, put this out there, because it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. At the end of the day, I mean, are we saying this is a problem? This person is an issue? No, we're accepting that this is a beloved creation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but, then why is there stigma? So the biggest challenge for me personally, having to advocate for my daughter, was people just not understanding the need, because they didn't see people like our families or these beautiful individuals that I'm talking with today. They didn't see them in the community. And they said, well, where are they? Where are they? And I'm telling you, they're everywhere. They're in every community. We have over 1,000 families registered with our organization, with Muslim, and they're there. There are people out there who are, wanting to be a part of what's going on in the community. So the challenge in advocating is, one, showing people that, yes, we exist, and two, convincing other people and other families to come out of the woodworks. And that's actually why we created, Muslim as a platform. But enough about me. Jumping back to all of you, think about what the most challenging part you feel, and you might agree with what I said. You might have a different challenge about advocating, for this kind of minority group. We are a minority. We're one of those minorities that at any time anyone could become a part of this minority group. So what would you say? Anyone can jump in as to what they found to be the most challenging part.
I personally, I noticed, especially within the Muslim community, because first of all, there's stigma everywhere, even within the wider community. But in the Muslim community, whenever we try to address stigma, it's usually not acknowledged, because there are not only misconceptions on disability, but there are also misconceptions on Islam related to disability. So if we do voice and address that someone is hypothetically talking down at us or treating us differently, sometimes some Muslims can say, assume the best, like have husn zan, or be patient. So when Islam is misreferenced that way, it can get hard. But it's mostly because maybe not understanding Islam as well as disability. So having to advocate not only as a person with disability, but also advocate what Islam says. So I find that the most challenging.
Great, thank you. Anyone else?
Yeah, for me, one issue because we are dealing with behavioral disability and it's not so apparent, and there's no blood test or there's no objective test for these sort of things. We're talking about ADHD or even autism. It was like it took us years to finally even figure out the bottom of the behaviors that we were dealing with, and we went to multiple health practitioners. And this issue obviously is not just related, to being in the Muslim community, but I found that at some point, I had to step in as the mother and realize that I started to actually know more than some of the health practitioners, and I mean this with all due respect. It's not to knock on, because I do have a lot of physicians in our family, but just when you're dealing with behavior, like why is the child acting, I'm like acting this way? Is it anxiety? Is it, not able to communicate? Is it, not able to regulate? What is it? And so you kind of have to test. And then I started just to tell the practitioners, like, I think this diagnosis is wrong because it's not serving us. I got to a point where I had to pick the diagnosis, to see, to see how the diagnosis serves us versus us, like trying to figure out the diagnosis into some sort of formula, based on the DSM, the diagnostic, what was it called? For the mental health disorders. And so that was, the biggest challenge, and just basically trying to be understood and find an answer to a lot of the questions that we had. And it's still an ongoing journey, and so that's been the toughest part for us.
One of the things that I've done is, as a diversity and intercultural trainer, is really first deal with raising awareness of what I say are those tapes in people's minds that are playing. So raising awareness about when they first think about a person, when they hear the word disability, and the main thing is, I'm sure, or I'm going to say based on my experience, is can't work, can't travel, can't live normal lives. Children, the assumption is that they can't play sports. And that's the incredible part about Mawson, is that you have provided a way to do can, and that is what I try to do, is to make them aware of those tapes in their head, and then by sharing our stories and letting them see. But it's first raising the awareness of the stereotypes, and not in a way that makes them feel guilty, that it's normal, right? That we all have them. But we've got to be aware first in order to press pause on them, in order to deal with the behavior that is going to, and that deals with the stigma. And sadly, and that's why Mohsen is so important, is making the accessibility, because in the Masajids, it can be the hardest place to have accessibility. So it's dealing with what are the labels and how do we get people to, first of all, recognize the way that that's causing a barrier.
Absolutely.
I think for me, the hardest thing, and I think all of you guys touched on it a little bit, is that prior to your work with the disabled community, I mean, you realize that there are already assumptions there and built on, and stigmas and things that are already ingrained in people and they already believe. And so going to work on that and help lessen that stigma a little, or work on that stigma, you find that as you tear one wall down and start to rebuild, there's another wall oftentimes behind it. And you don't realize that it was there as you're starting, and then it almost feels as if you're starting all over again, because the one behind it ultimately gets back to the one in front of it that you just tore down and you're trying to work on. So I think that was the hardest thing for me, was it's not so simple as to just work on one community, because for example, my work in the Masjid, I mean, my local Masjid work there on things, but then people are going home and their family has assumptions and they're putting it into them. And it's especially working with the youth, I've noticed that they working with the youth is a good thing because you're starting fresh in some ways or fresher, but then they go home and their parents or their grandparents have different assumptions, and they're just getting told different things from all different directions, and it's overwhelming. Even for someone trying to learn, it's overwhelming. And then for yourself, it's keeping up that patience and reminding yourself that it can be overwhelming for them. It's nobody's fault, but they get home and or they go to school or they go to work and other people are telling them different things. They're implying different things. It doesn't even. It's usually not even direct sayings, but implications that are there. So, but I think that was the hardest part for me was kind of realizing just how complicated it is and the patience to keep working at it, although it is complicated.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that so much in all of you. I think patience is a key ingredient that goes through all of us here, mashallah. Strong women like yourselves, there's no other way. Patience and persistence, because you believe in what you're doing, you believe in what you believe, and you push forward regardless. And what you said about kind of deprogramming people in the way that they think or the way that their elders have taught them. I know we use the word awareness, but when this organization was founded by Sheikh Omar Suleiman, and he and I had discussions about what we wanted to do, one of the biggest things he said was, I want to get past the awareness. Like, what are you going to do? And that was my challenge, was to come up with, what are we going to do with this organization? Right. Awareness, a lot of people do awareness.
Yeah.
And it's what comes after awareness.
After.
And so we kind of coined the tagline, awareness, accommodation, acceptance.
Yes.
What we want to do throughout, all our work is make a difference, an impact, and impact those lives, and take action on just so awareness. So I'll give you a quick example, and I'll lead into kind of the next. So the next question is actually, what's the best part of kind of what we do when we do this kind of advocacy work? What's the best part? And one of the best stories, one of many. Alhamdulillah, we've had a chance to go to make Umrah with Mohsin, with our organization, 3 times, with groups of families and individuals with different needs, and it's just been life-changing. So that in itself, it's like we're a walking, talking, rolling, signing billboard for diversity wherever we go, through airports, and so we're conversation starters when we meet people. Oftentimes 100 of us in a group. And there was a brother one year in our group who was deaf, and we had a sign language interpreter with him. And I remember just watching them sign with each other, and they were so involved in their conversation. And I felt really guilty that I've never taken the time to learn sign language. I felt badly that this is a brother of mine that I really can't even start to communicate with. And he's here on this trip. We're all enjoying the same things, and I can't exchange with him. And I would just watch. I watched them. And subhanAllah, I was sitting there, and I don't know what occurred to me. I mentioned it to the sign language interpreter, because I would talk through the interpreter. I would talk to the brother, but then have him sign what I was trying to say. And I said, this is like so convoluted, but at least we're having an exchange. And then the sign language interpreter, Allah bless him, Kamal, we miss you if you're watching. He said, just text. And I said, what? And he said, what's the brother what you want to say? And so I pulled out my phone, my notes, and I just started putting in, the question I wanted to ask. And I turned the phone around and I showed it to him. And And he shook his head and he texted on his notepad and he showed me the answer. And all of a sudden, we were having this exchange directly with no one in between. And it was such an eye-opening moment for me. I don't even know, like, I'm tearing up thinking about it because it's so powerful when you break down those silos. And, you know, as someone not living myself, alhamdulillah, with a typical disability or diverse ability, I felt that I could never understand and never really, you know, but I was having this exchange with my brother that it just took a little bit of creativity to think about it. So that was one of the best parts and one of the memorable. And my point in sharing the story is immerse yourself with these people. Put yourself with people in the community who are different than you. And I think all I can say is you will be better. You will learn from the experience. And you're not doing anyone any favors. This is about, you know, the human connection. And I think it's amazing when that happens and you see people like this in our community. We can learn so much from them.
Yes.
I can go on and on about stories. Our humans of Muslim are amazing people, but I'll let you all jump in and share kind of what the best part of this work is, because it's addictive. It's what keeps me going. It's what wakes me up each day. Alhamdulillah.
Well, just to add on that, I think that no matter you have a disability or not, just to know and hear from others that they relate to your disability experience, even though that they don't have a disability themselves, I mean, that's beautiful. It allows you to connect on a deeper level, on a human level. So I would think that would be the best part. And I think the time that we are in, this time of social media, we get to connect. If we don't come across people with disabilities within our own community, and we can still connect with those that are abroad or those that care somehow. Like I can never imagine like talking to all of you like a few years ago. I'm literally the other side of the globe, and we get to connect and discuss and, you know, talk about a topic that is usually uncomfortable for a lot of people. And it's just really, really beautiful to know that it's okay to talk about, you know, our experiences. It's okay to talk about disability. It's just a matter of finding the right people to connect with and how there are people around the world showing up out of care, whether or not they're whether they're siblings or parents or just allies, how Muslims care and they're showing up, and that our experiences matter and they're getting addressed. So I think that's the best part.
Absolutely. What else?
Yeah, for me, I find a lot of joy when I help other people, like when other parents come to me and say, hey, you know, I saw your Facebook post, or, you know, I heard that, you know, that you had a similar experience, and, you know, and like, what advice can you give me? And I'm happy to share our experience and give them the advice that they need. And, you know, and also with the background as a lawyer, I like to give them a little bit of the law too, and what their rights are. And in addition to that, just watching the progress in my son. And when we finally get, you know, it's like you're watering a plant, and at first you feel like this plant isn't going to grow, and you're frustrated, you're sad, and then, you know, you go here, and, you know, this water doesn't work, that water doesn't work, that water was actually toxic, and you kind of go around and you finally find something that says, okay, like now we're seeing some progress, you see some fruit of that labor. So that twofold, you know, benefit is, you know, like, I mean, yeah, those two things really keep me going.
That's the best part of this work.
I mean, I think, again, building off of that, my best part, I guess, is just you're always told the ayah with hardship comes ease. But a lot of times that's interpreted as with that hardship, eventually, after that hardship, there will be ease. But it's realizing that it's not necessarily that case. It's not you get the hardship and then directly after you get the ease somehow, some way. It's within that hardship there are fountains of ease everywhere. I mean, at first you think that it's so small and they're just it's sprinkled within it, but really there's a lot. And for me, it's been the people. I was talking about like the hard, like what's hard for me throughout it, but also, I mean, keeping patience is difficult, but there's also people that you meet that you're like, this is this is the acceptance that I'm striving for within the community. I mean, like this is what this work is supposed to bring out in everyone in one person. And even that one person oftentimes is just motivated and or seeing someone finally grasp what you were trying to show them. It's that ease that's been my motivator that's kept me going is just realizing that it's not the hardship and you have to wait all this time for the ease, but that it's within that hardship that you do find that ease. So that's personally how my experience has been, and I think a lot of you touched on that a little bit.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Thank you. Can we perhaps have you all, as kind of a final formal question, share your personal goal. So, if you have to think, like, what is your legacy? Well, and this is not something, I mean, I'm, you know, now at the stage of my life where I do think about, what would you want people to benefit and, benefit from when your work is done? What is that legacy you want to leave behind in relation to, disability work in the Muslim community? Um, what's important that people remember as what you've contributed and what you've done? Think about it that way.
My sense in my work is really being able to think of people with differing abilities, disabilities, to remove the dis and we're hearing about the othering, and to look at belonging, and that we widen the net, and widening that net, that it's an asset. It's not a deficit. When we're bringing in our children with autism, or with ADHD, or with physical disabilities, that's what I'm wanting to do, is to shift the perceptions. I mean, that's what my life's work has been as a Muslim, uh, growing up in a Southern Christian community, is breaking down the stereotypes and misperceptions about Muslims. But now it's broadened based on my lived experiences with multiple sclerosis, and that's really what I want, is particularly for the young people, and is how can we take away the dis and look at the abilities, because I feel it's like you were mentioning, the deaf community. There is a whole different way of communicating. And I, look at the world with COVID. The world was told lockdown, stay home. And this device in my hand has been my access before COVID with MS and even more so, right? I've been able to engage even more now. And what is Zoom? The latest with Zoom has said that they want to make Zoom to be more accessible to people with disabilities. So I feel that the COVID crisis has recognized in a way, how can we be more accessible to all? But yes, to people with disabilities. So slash the discs is see the wealth of abilities in all. That is the legacy, inshallah, ya Rab, that I hope.
Absolutely, inshallah. And I think there's no doubt to people watching online today that, and I say this absolutely confidently, that although we're all different in our own way and diverse, there is no lack of ability on this panel today, mashallah. I have to say hats off to all of you. There is no lack. It's seeing it. And you know, we have a board member at Mustin, a dear brother, a dear friend, who also has a physical disability, and he's in a wheelchair now, and it's been progressive, so he hasn't always been that way. And people, I mean, he laughs about it, which is great because it's so approachable. You know, people, when they see someone in a wheelchair, sometimes they go to them and they speak really loudly. And I can hear just fine, you know. Or, you know, oh, you work? Yeah, work in corporate America.
Yes.
So it's that familiarity we all need. You know, just the next time you see someone, you know, maybe approach them. Maybe people would ask all the time, Sister Juhi, how do we approach a family in a masjid who has special needs? I said, how do you approach any family? You say salam. Simple as that. Oh, they won't mind? People would say they won't mind? No, we won't mind, you know. Anyway, I'll give it back to the other panelists, but, you know, personal goals, what you want people to, you know, see as a legacy or work that you're doing, you know, that's important.
I mean, mine's actually pretty similar to Luby's, that I really want people to question their concept of normal and what is a normal human, what is a normal person, you know, because, you know, we've been dealing more with, you know, behaviors, but some of those behaviors, we want to call them disorders. But in reality, I think a lot of these behaviors are just due to the fact that we have a society and we've created what normal is, and if you don't fit into that normal, then you have a disorder. So, for example, someone, like I know with my son, like, you know, loud noises or music, he has a difficult time tolerating that. And so, you know, is that really a disorder? I mean, like, if the music is too loud for me, I turn it down. I'm not diagnosed with some sort of disorder, but, you know, his threshold is lower. So we all really just need to really question, like, what is normal and what is the barriers that we put up that maybe wouldn't be so abnormal if we didn't, you know, just expect people to be like us and our perception of normal.
Great point.
For me, it's besides writing as much as I can, whether it's children's books, poetry books, or nonfiction, my main goal throughout is to find solutions. I mean, how to effectively address stigma, or how to effectively address ableism and dismantle it and understand the impacts, especially on the different types of disabilities. Like, for example, if someone is on the wheelchair and we cannot move and leave a scenario, I mean, how can we be more careful when we talk and not impose something on them when we can't even leave a situation on our own? How to create safe spaces within our communities. What is a safe space? How to foster belonging? How to promote collaborations within the Muslim community, disability space, and also wider community, because we are minorities, both within the Muslim community and also the wider community. So we cannot afford to be working alone. I mean, I just hope to see and be part of, like, brainstorming together, you know, like, how can we solve some of the everyday realities that people with disabilities face, and how can we build a more stronger solidarity? Inshallah, I hope. I don't want to help.
Inshallah, inshallah.
I mean, I think my legacy, I guess you'd say, is just part of it for me was realizing that even if there's one person that I impact to think in a different way and to possibly in the future raise their kids that way, or go home and talk to their family about it. If there's just one person that there's an effect with, then there was an effect. I mean, mission accomplished.
Absolutely.
That's kind of been the mindset for me, because at first, I mean, getting into it, I didn't think that way, and I thought about it as a big thing, and it is a big thing, but it becomes overwhelming if you look at it that way. So for me specifically, it's just focusing on maybe that one person who walked into the masjid and saw a girl in a wheelchair who was a leader in that masjid, a volunteer for the youth. Maybe they'll say, wow, that was possible, because oftentimes they don't think it's possible, and that's where the stigma comes from, is they don't grasp that things are able to get done. They just have to get done in a different way, and that's fine.
Absolutely.
So that's kind of been my experience and how I've tried to look at things.
I really appreciate that. And you know, I always like to say power over pity.
Yeah.
Nobody needs pity. Nobody's looking for pity. Pity doesn't help. You know, empower these individuals, empower people. That's what this is all about. And you know, we'll take any questions if there are any. If people have questions, put them in the chat. But I just can't tell you enough how blessed I feel to have been able to speak to you ladies this morning, and morning and early morning in Hong Kong. We have, mashallah, Sadia is all the way from Hong Kong. We actually are seeing all your comments. People are picking up on some of the gems that were shared. The analogy about the plants, Sister Danya, absolutely. I think we all have a conversation to have even after this, and perhaps if those who've missed it watch the recording. The work we do continues. The work we do is going to be never ending, but it's getting there. And I think, you know, when we talk legacy, you know, small steps, and we are seeing that conversation is changing. We are seeing that there are communities becoming more welcoming. We're seeing the youth have a whole different attitude about people with different abilities. And so, mashallah, you know, I am a bit of a perfectionist and someone who wants to see results, but people slow me down. People close to me and say, look at how much you have done, or look at how much Mohsen has done. You know, we'll keep going. But I thank you all for listening, and I would be amiss in not sharing our coffee chat mug this morning that a few of our ladies do have, and it's available. I'm going to be promoting them. Go to mohsen.org/shop, and we have these amazing mugs. Yes, they're orange on the inside. They're lovely mugs. But please do continue to support and watch our work. We have a great lineup for you for Ramadan, inshallah, with a lot more real people speaking to you. So thank you all for being online today. Thank you so much to my co-panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
And inshallah, we'll do this again. We would love to do this again. But jazakallah khair. Thanks, everyone. And salam for now. Take care. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much. And we hope